It is the 19th of December and it's time for the 19th entry in my 24 ghost stories for Christmas. This one's a little bit special to me because it had a real impact on my mind as a kid, and it had a real impact on a lot of people throughout Britain. It is actually one of the most controversial pieces of television ever made because it supposedly resulted in a number of suicides and the post traumatic stress of children. Not all children, but some children. So I'm talking about Ghostwatch, which was released in 1992 by the BBC. It was shown on Halloween, and I can remember coming home and watching it after being out, sort of, we call it guising, but trick or treating. It was quite a traumatic night for me anyway, because I'd actually just seen someone get run over bizarrely when I was at the bottom of a road, and then we came up the road and they were okay, but we then went back up to my house and we sat, and I think it was maybe, well, it must have been, yeah, it must have been 12, and it was a real experience, a real shared thing to watch Ghostwatch that night. The next day everybody was buzzing about it, everyone was talking about it, and the BBC received something like 30,000 phone calls to it. It is a really, it was really an innovative piece of television, and well, I mean, you probably want to know what it's about if you haven't actually watched it, and there's a good chance you haven't seen it because it's something which has never been repeated, at least in the United Kingdom. It was actually banned for 10 years, so the ban was lifted in 2002, but I really doubt that it will ever be shown again because of the deaths which were allegedly connected to the show. Ghostwatch is a supposedly live documentary television program where you have a group of panelists in a TV studio talking about the paranormal, while they have an on location group of presenters who are investigating a haunting at a house somewhere in England. This haunting seems to revolve around two young daughters in the house. The entire haunting is loosely based or loosely influenced by the accounts of the Enfield poltergeist case, which is a really famous poltergeist case from England, where even police officers and some fairly reputable eyewitnesses claimed that this poltergeist phenomenon seemed to be real. But there is a lot of debate about that, but that's not what this video is about. It's about Ghostwatch. So the programme sort of goes back and forward, much like many television shows that we see now, just like Most Haunted, which I'm sure they must have taken the idea from. If you've ever watched Most Haunted live, they have a group of people on location investigating a supposedly haunted environment, and it keeps jumping back to the studio where they have guests, panelists, historians, parapsychologists, people like that, talking about the paranormal and the history of where they're investigating. So in Ghostwatch, what made it really work was the fact that they didn't use actors really, they used reputable television presenters. So you're watching this and you really think it's real. In fact, two of them were children's presenters, and one of them was Sarah Green, her husband Mike Green, and is his name Mike Green? I don't know. Mike, we just call him Mike. And also Craig Charles, who is an actor, but he was used as a presenter, so they were all sort of being themselves. But the most important aspect of it was Michael Parkinson, who is probably about the most respected reviewer in Britain, certainly at that time, but even still today, Michael Parkinson is seen as probably the greatest sort of chat show host or interviewer of his time. And this brought a real level of authenticity to the show. Much of the show took place in the studio where Michael Parkinson would be talking to a parapsychologist who had been investigating the case and about her experiences with it, and they would show archive footage of things that had supposedly happened in the house, recordings, audio recordings, and video footage of like sort of different investigations and things like that. And that really brought this sort of level of sort of mystery to it, this element of mystery, which again is present in most of the great ghost stories. On location, we had Sarah Green and a camera crew inside the house talking to the family and trying to get to the bottom about what was happening, and hopefully trying to capture on video some of the sort of ghostly goings on that had been happening. Out in the street, you had Craig Charles, who was going around interviewing neighbours and eyewitnesses and things like that, and trying to, he really tried to add the comedy to it. He obviously wasn't really taking it very seriously and was sort of jumping around and, really sort of joking about. Michael Parkinson himself as well seemed to be the skeptic, very much the skeptic, but without the jokes. He's taking it seriously, but he doesn't believe that any of this is real. As Ghostwatch progresses, we start to see things happening in the house, and we really get this building sense of this, crescendo, this sort of moment of climax in the story. It's dated in some ways, there's no doubt that it's dated in some ways, but it was extremely ambitious. In fact, it's probably, for the time, about the most ambitious piece of television that anyone had ever watched in Britain. And it was brilliantly done. It's just that it is very much of its time, so there are aspects of it which are kind of dated, just the whole setup of the studio and stuff like that looks very sort of cheap now, but at the time it looked like a television programme from that era, so it came across as really authentic. It is, in my opinion, very frightening. I think there are some moments which are done better than others. It's not perfect, but for what it is, it's still an incredible achievement, and it really had an effect on me. I remember I was sitting there, I think one of my friends was there as well, we were still dressed up in our sort of outfits, our costumes, and my family were sitting there, we were watching it in the middle of this really tense moment. There was we had all the sweets out and all that for the trick-or-treaters, and this bottle of Coke just sort of popped in the middle of it, and I crapped myself. But it really sort of drew its audience in, and they had in the studio, when they kept cutting to the studio, they would say phone in. They'd put up a number, just like so many shows that you've seen. Phone in and let us know about your experiences. Is anything creepy happening while you're watching this? And they had callers calling in. The thing is, most of us didn't realise that it was actually fake in the beginning. We didn't realise that it was all staged, all scripted, and people actually were phoning in. 30,000 people phoned in, but unfortunately, rather than getting what they were supposed to get was a message telling them, look, this is a drama, so don't worry about it. Because so many people phoned in, the phone lines were all tied up, so they were getting the engaged tone, which would then make them just think that it was real, that it was actually happening. The closest analogy to it is the War of the Worlds radio program, which Orson Welles did in America, where they tried to present that in a real way. They used programs which were normally broadcast, and then they would interrupt with a news bulletin throughout the night about an alien invasion, and some people genuinely believed that that was happening, and this was the case with Ghostwatch. A lot of people thought it was real. When you watch it now, especially the conclusion, it's difficult to see how an adult could sit and go, yeah, this is real. You would think that most people would know that it was fake, but at the time, we hadn't really seen anything like it before, so it was this real postmodern take on the television programme. It was self-aware without letting the audience know that it was self-aware, and this really added again to the authenticity of it. Now afterwards, there was a huge level of outrage towards the programme. It got banned for 10 years. I think people tried to bring out civil actions against the makers of the program, because unfortunately at least one person, a young guy who he was an adult but he had learning difficulties, and it's really sad actually. In the story there is there's banging that goes on throughout the house, and it seems to be coming. The young girls in the house call it pipes. That's what they've nicknamed the ghost. But in real life, this guy was at home with his family, and they had a dodgy central heating system, and their pipes were making noises, and he was obsessed with the program by this time, and he believed that this was this ghost from this television program. He believed it was real. And he unfortunately committed suicide, which is an absolute tragedy. So there is the question of, were the programmers responsible in what they did? My view on it is, as much I love the program, like I absolutely love it, but I think they were naive when they made it, because although the BBC had actually thought about pulling the program just weeks before it was being aired, but they managed to get the filmmakers to put up a Screen One logo, which meant this is BBC drama, and also a written by Stephen Volk's credit on it to let people know, hey, this isn't real. But it was done in such a way that, you know, if you tuned in after the first minute, you wouldn't have seen that anyway. And also it was done in such a way that obviously the program makers' intentions wasn't really to break that illusion. They wanted people to believe that it was real, which you would think is fine, but there are people out there who are gullible. There are also people out there like that poor lad that committed suicide who have learning difficulties. It's a difficult thing. Personally, for me, I think the program would have been just as frightening if it had been made clear that it was real. Get that the wrong way around. Strike that, reverse it. If it had been made clear that the program was fiction, I think it should have been made clear that was the case. But even then, I don't think the programmers can be held accountable for some people's actions. But you do have to look at it this way, you know, if the news, for example, reports something which is false, it can influence people's actions and people's opinions. So you really do have to state that it's fiction, in my opinion. But all that aside, Ghostwatch is one of the most frightening pieces of television that I've ever watched. It has dated, like I said before, but it really has some brilliantly effective scares in it, and it's a really great take on the modern ghost story, and it's one that if you can find it, definitely go check it out. I think again, like a lot of the BFI DVDs, it's really expensive. I was lucky enough, like the program had stayed in my mind since it had aired, so the second I heard that there was a limited release of it, I bought it, as did a friend of mine. There is going to be next year a documentary, apparently. I think it's called Behind the Curtain or something like that, that has been about 3 or 4 years in the making. It's all about the phenomena that followed Ghostwatch and all about the program, and they've interviewed all the people that were involved with it. So that should be interesting to watch. I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I know I've went on quite a bit here, but it really is an important television program. It is really frightening, and it is an excellent entry in the 24 Ghost Stories for Christmas. So go check it out, and I'll be back tomorrow with another ghost story, I think. No, I will be. Thanks for listening.